This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. This is session number 33 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, folks. I'm your host, Gordon Brewer, and I'm so glad you've joined me today. We're in the middle of a series here with the podcast. I decided that I'd take a stab at doing just a 4-part series and do it back to back on 4 days in a row. And so if you're listening to the podcast for the first time, that's what you've caught us in the middle of doing, is this 4-part series of what I'm calling Love the Work, Hate the Job. And just real quickly, the background of this is that last year I put together a little course, a mini course called Love the Work, Hate the Job. And it's really geared for those people out there that might be thinking about changing careers, or they might be working for an agency and wanting to move into private practice. I know that is part of my story, and I'm not going to go into that today. And you can go back and listen to the part 1 of this series and hear a little bit of that story. But anyway, the course is still available there. It's Love the Work, Hate the Job, and you can find that at practiceoftherapy.com/love the work course. And since you're listening to the podcast, you can get a discount on that. And if you'll go to get the discount, if you'll go to the URL practiceoftherapy.com Love the Work discount, and you can get 25% off on that course. But anyway, what I'm doing in this series is just giving you an introduction to some of the concepts of that course, and just talking about what it takes to move into private practice from agency work. So I'm glad you've joined us today. And so today I'm going to be talking about making a plan and what you need to plan for. You know, when I went into private practice, nearly 15 years ago, I went into it starting out part-time. And when I've talked to a lot of people that have gone into private practice, a lot of them started that way. And so I was working at the agency at the time, and was able to start seeing clients in the evenings and on weekends. And with the situation that I had, the agency I worked for, we primarily worked with children and youth and their families. And so one of the things that was to an advantage for me is that I wasn't creating a conflict of interest with the organization, and most organizations are going to have a conflict of interest or a do not compete type of thing in there, and so you have to be kind of careful around that. But part of my plan at the time was to start seeing people part-time and just kind of see what happened from there. As I look back on that, when I went into private practice, I really didn't have a plan other than I just thought, well, let me try doing this part-time and see what happens. And so my plan in a way was just an experiment. But looking at it now, I wish I would have been a little more organized in what I did, and probably my growth would have been much faster if I had gone into it with a more specific plan. But anyway, I think the place to start in planning for private practice is to really kind of begin to understand the numbers and the financial side of things. After all, you know, unless you're in a financial situation where you don't have to be worried about the income of a practice or getting a paycheck, so to speak, you're really going to have an understanding of that from the very beginning. So I think the place to start in planning for going into private practice is look at where you are now financially. And I mean, just looking at the whole thing in terms of not just what you're making at your job, but also what is required for you and your family and your income. and really getting a handle on that. If you're struggling financially in your own life, you probably need to get a better handle on that before you'd make the jump into private practice, because private practice by its very nature has a lot of ups and downs. Now, once you grow to a certain size, the ups and downs are less noticeable because you've got the volume to support your practice. But anyway, I think the place to start is to look at where you are now financially. So a good way to do that is take your base salary now with your current job, and write that down. Look also at what is the value of the benefits that you're receiving from your current job. So if you're getting health insurance, a retirement plan, workman's compensation, all of those kinds of things need to be taken into consideration with that total amount that you need to be able to exchange for private practice work. So getting a number in mind and being able to understand that. The other thing too is as in any business, you're going to have what is referred to as overhead costs. In other words, what it costs you to keep your practice in place and to continue to see clients. So you're going to have an office, and your office you're going to have to probably pay rent, and you're going to have to pay for electrical and utilities and all of those things, depending on how you've got it set up and where you find an office. So that all of those things would be part of your overhead. Any marketing efforts, if you're doing any sort of paid advertising, that sort of thing, all of that goes under the cost of doing business. So you need to add that amount to whatever you expect to bring home or what you expect your salary to be. So as you can see, those things kind of add up as you're going along. Now, don't let that discourage you about going into private practice. It's just a matter of understanding the total picture and the total numbers. The next thing I think that you need to do is, and this is kind of a repeat, is to get your financial house in order. You don't want to go into business or go into private practice with a whole lot of debt behind you. So if you've got student loans, if you've got car payments, house payments, those kinds of things, have a plan in place for how you're going to pay those down as you go into private practice. I know some people have, I know a good friend of mine, he went into private practice for the sole purpose of paying off his college debt. And he didn't really realize that when he went into private practice, that it would turn into a whole change of career. He was working for an agency and really kind of enjoying that agency work, but he figured, okay, I've got to have some extra money, so I'm going to start seeing some clients on the side to pay down my debt, my college loan debts. And so as he did that, he went in, it turned out that it flipped around and that he actually ended up making more money from his private practice than he did at his agency job. And so being able to devote more time to the private practice was a no-brainer, and he was able to make that switch. So in thinking about your plan, I'm really thinking about your having some goals in mind around how you're going to take care of yourself financially. As I mentioned I think in the previous podcast, the number one reason that people fail in private practice is because they don't have the financial side of things in order. So as you think about making that plan, first look at your numbers. And then after you have some numbers in mind, you can begin to think about, okay, what are maybe some phases at which you're going to build things? So, for example, are you going to continue to work at your agency job until you reach a certain volume of clients? And so being able to have an understanding of how many clients would you need to be seeing in order to make that switch. And so, again, it's just a matter of doing the math. So if you're getting $100 a session, you see 15 clients in 1 week, that's $1,500. And then you multiply that by the number of weeks that you work, and you subtract your overhead, and that's where you get the numbers as far as what your take-home pay is and what you're going to end up paying yourself. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of thinking about a plan. The other parts of planning are being able to, obviously in the initial stages, think about where and how you're going to provide services. Certainly there's the traditional way, which most of us tend to do, and that is finding an office space where you can actually see clients and places to meet with clients that come to see you. You know, another way to think about it, and a lot of people have done pretty well with this, is to do strictly online counseling and set up an online therapy practice. There's lots of resources about that. It's certainly something that is up and coming in our field, in that more and more people are doing teletherapy. I was thinking ahead to my going to be doing some volunteer work this summer, and I really don't want to have to cancel some sessions. So what I plan to do is see those clients online as best I can while I'm doing that volunteer work at a camp that I help out with every summer. So there's lots of other ways of seeing clients in which you can provide your services, provide counseling, provide therapy in kind of non-traditional ways. Another idea that's out there is doing like in-home therapy or doing in-home services. And in that case, you really don't have to have an office. You just simply go where the client is. And there are people that do that. Of course, you've got to take into account safety concerns and all of that sort of thing as well. Another one that is, I know done, and my friend Clay Cockrell does this, and he's also does teletherapy, but he really started his practice in New York City by doing what he called walk and talk therapy. So there in that big city, and certainly in a place where you could have conversations and people wouldn't really notice you that much, walking through Central Park, is he would just meet his clients at the park and then just walk through the park, and they would talk and have their session while they were walking. So again, thinking outside the box about where and how you can provide services might be part of your plan. So the other part of planning is learning about marketing and how you're going to get clients into your practice. And so coming up with a strategy around how you're going to market your practice, how you're going to make those contacts, and how you're going to get people in to see you, and doing it in an ethical way. As I mentioned earlier, being able to not have any conflicts of interest while you're working at an agency if you start your practice part-time. So another thing I'll throw out there as far as planning is being able to, if you're working for an agency, is leaving the agency altogether, getting a part-time job that has nothing to do with therapy, but it will bring you something, bring you some income while you're building your practice. And again, that was something that I did early on. I was kind of the timeline of my private practice is that I was working for the agency. I started seeing clients in the evenings and on weekends that were, not conflicts of interest type of clients. Mainly worked with, in my private practice, worked with adults and couples, whereas the agency work was with children and youth. So there wasn't really a conflict of interest there. But anyway, I started doing that. And then once my practice grew to a place where I really felt comfortable that I had a steady flow of clients, a steady flow of referrals, I was able to leave the agency job, but I really felt like I needed a safety net. So I took another half-time job as a coordinator for another organization called Episcopal Appalachian Ministries. And so I was kind of the administrator for that, and at the same time had my private practice. And so, again, I allowed my private practice to grow. And once my private practice got to a place where I couldn't devote the time I needed to the other half-time job, I quit the other half-time job and moved in full time. And that took place over a 6-year period. So the other thing about planning that to take into consideration is giving it the time that you need. As you probably know, you can't just go out and hang up your shingle, so to speak, and say, I'm in practice, in private practice. It takes time to build the practice and to build that referral base and to get folks in. So part of your plan is giving yourself a timeline and being able to say, okay, this first month, if I get 2 new clients, that would be a good thing. And then setting another goal of getting maybe 5 new clients the next month and the next. Now, that might seem like some slow growth, but in my own experience, slow growth is going to be slow growth is more sustainable than quick growth. So keep that in mind as you think about making a plan for private practice. Well, hopefully this gives you some ideas about making plans and planning for going into private practice, and maybe some ideas around how you can approach that. I think the big thing is just to be able to map it out for yourself, and I think that's where you're going to succeed. And it's also going to take a lot of anxiety away around doing this if you've got that plan in place, so to speak, and being able to have a vision about how you're going to go from point A to point B in your private practice. So that's it for today's this section on Love the Work, Hate the Job. This was session number 2 in the series. And tomorrow we're going to be talking about how to set up the office and some of the logistics around just getting an office set up, and also a little bit more about thinking outside the box and doing therapy services and creating a private practice in maybe some more non-traditional or less traditional ways than we normally do that. So take care, folks, and do go over to practiceoftherapy.com/lovetheworkcourse. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, if you'd like to get a discount, get 25% off on the Love the Work course, go to practiceoftherapy.com/lovetheworkdiscount, and you can get the discount for the course. So take care, folks, and join us tomorrow for part 3 of Love the Work, Hate the Job. You have been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. If you haven't already, please sign up to receive the free Private Practice Startup Guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.